Good afternoon, brothers and sisters, and welcome to Readings with Regina. Now, before I start with the books today, I want to share a little bit with you about what's going on in Africa. All right, contemporary Africa. You see this brother right here? Well, he is either the prime minister or president of Mali. And because he's declared his independence from France, all right, France, the United States, and the Ukrainians are fighting in Mali. But the Malayan forces have overtook, from what I can see, these outsiders from Al Qaeda. And who do you think created Al Qaeda? United States, European powers. Yes. So I wanted to point out this brother, okay? Asimi Goita. I believe I'm saying his name correctly. And of course, this brother on the far right is Ibrahim Traore, all right, Burkina Faso. And I want you to know about him too. And in the middle is let me see, I think his name is Abdul Rahman Chiani. Anyway, these three giants have stepped into leadership in Africa, and the colonial powers hate that. All right, so they want to destroy them. So I just wanted to share that with you in case you did not know about what's going on currently in Africa today. Brothers are taking over countries that were ruled by white folk. That is a good thing. Marcus Garvey would be celebrating. So would the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Definitely Malcolm X. Absolutely. And his month is coming up, because he was born on May 19th. Yes. So May is tomorrow, as a matter of fact. Anyway, you know what? I never say the dates that I actually visit you with. And this is April the 30th. Tomorrow's May 1st. Okay? Anyway, and 2026. But here we go to the books. Now, I have a couple of new subscribers. Thank you so very much for being with me and subscribing to my channel. That means something to YouTube. I'm not sure what, but supposed to mean something. Point is, though, thank you for being here. Readings with Regina was created because books are very important, and I want to bring mothers, fathers, grandparents, children, okay, to start reading more. And these videos can be used as a teaching tool. As a matter of fact, I just mentioned to you the African continent, right? Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso. You should have a globe. You should have a globe so that you could see the geography of these places. Boom. All right, here we go to our first book, The Slave Ship by Marcus Rediker. And, I won't talk about that right now because I don't want to get off the subject. And I have reading to do with you, but I did talk to Marcus Rediker, and he's a heck of a scholar. You should look up his website. Here we go. Thomas Clarkson, The Variety of Slaving Vessels, 1787. A vessel of almost any size could be a slave ship, as the abolitionist Thomas Clarkson discovered. To his utter astonishment, in June 1787, he had journeyed from London to Bristol to gather evidence about the slave trade. He was especially interested in the, quote, construction and dimensions, end of quote, of the ships and the packing of the bodies of would-be plantation workers. Having a few months earlier gone aboard Captain Colley's Fly, that was the name of the slave ship, a more or less typical 200-ton ship that lay at anchor in the Thames, Clarkson had a clear image of the slaver in mind. He was shocked to find at Bristol two little sloops that were fitting out for Africa. One was a vessel of only 25 tons. Its master intended to pick up 70 slaves. The other was even smaller. It measured 11 tons and would take on board a mere 30 slaves. One of Clarkson's companions explained that vessels of this size sometimes served as tenders going up and down West African coastal rivers, gathering 3 or 4 slaves at a time and delivering them to the big ships anchored off the coast and bound for the New World. But the tiny vessels discovered by Clarkson were said to be slavers in their own right and would transport their own captives to the West Indies. See, understand enslaving was a business. So you had the huge slave ships, and then you would have these little sloops, okay, that would gather slaves from Africa, West Africa, and deliver them to the big ships. Clarkson did not believe it. He couldn't believe it. He even wondered whether his informants were trying to trick him into making absurd statements about the slave trade that could be easily refuted and thereby, quote, injure the great cause which I had undertaken. That's Clarkson speaking. See, Clarkson's an abolitionist. And what is he going to do to fight for his cause? He's going to write a book. He's going to make statements about it, okay, before the politicians of that decade. He did not believe in the enslavement of African people. All right, back to the book. He learned that one of the vessels had been built as, quote, a pleasure boat. Can you imagine that? Enslavers called their little sloops a pleasure boat for the accommodation of only 6 persons. I want y'all to think about this. So we had these enslavers, right? Who maybe they weren't big merchants, maybe they didn't have a lot of money, but they had some. So they could build a little slave ship. Oh, and I wonder what that little slave ship was used for. Think about it, people. They called it a pleasure boat. My. A pleasure boat. Okay, here we go. On the Severe River, and that one, if not both, were to be sold as pleasure craft after they delivered their slaves to the West Indies. What's all this pleasure, John? What's that about? What's that, early Epstein? A pleasure boat that only took in 6 slaves? Think about it, people. All right, where am I? Clarkson decided to measure both vessels and to ask one of his companions to find the builder of the vessels and get his measurements too. The official information corresponded with Clarkson's own figures. In the larger vessel of the two, the area where the slaves would be incarcerated measured 31 feet in length by 10 feet, 4 inches in width, narrowing to 5 feet at the ends. Each slave, he calculated, would get about 3 square feet. In the smaller vessel, the slave room was 22 feet long, 8 feet tapering to 4 feet wide. The height from keel to beam was 5 feet 8 inches, but 3 feet were taken up by, quote, ballast, cargo, and provisions, end of quote, leaving for 30 slaves 4 square feet and about 2 feet inches of vertical space. Still incredulous, Clarkson had 4 persons make separate inquiries to confirm that the vessels really were going to Africa. All 4 found the original declaration to be true, and indeed, Clarkson himself soon confirmed the matter through official documents in the Bristol Custom House. Clarkson would have been even more astonished to learn that the 11-ton vessel he found was not the smallest on record. A 10-ton vessel called the Heskep. Isn't that a curious name? Heskep? Doesn't that sound like something we know today? Heskep? Heskep? Sailed from Liverpool to the Windward Coast and carried 30 enslaved people onto St. Kitts in 1761, and vessels of the same size would deliver slaves to Cuba and Brazil. In the middle of the 19th century, two 11-ton vessels, the Sally, that's what the slave ship was called, the Sally and the Adventure, that was another slave ship, made voyages from Rhode Island, like in New York, to Africa in 1764 and 1770. As Clarkson learned, even the smallest vessel could be a slave ship. Even the smallest vessel could be a slave ship. Even the smallest vessel could be a slave ship. What does that tell you, people? I want you to think about that. I want you to put together questions for your children and grandchildren about that, the different sizes of the slavers that brought our ancestors from West Africa to the Americas. Very important to do that. Hey, wait a minute. Let me say hello. Abibi hey, right on. Glad that you're here. So, here we go. Now I'm going to incidents in the life of a slave girl. Now, let me see, where am I? You know that Linda Brent's okay, I'm trying to move this. Hold on. Here we go. Okay. You know that this is not funny, but I don't know. My body just laughs sometimes because it's so cruel. Anyway, she had a pedophile owner. Boom. She ran away from him. Yes. He captured her children, little kids under 6, and put the children in jail. He thought that would bring her back. His name is Dr. Flint. All right. Anyway, in the meantime, the father of the children, who's white, boom, he put together a plan to retrieve his children from jail by buying them. Understand this, buying them, or I should know, he's not buying them, he's selling them. I'm sorry, selling them to a slave trader. Okay. Anyway, let me read the book and I'll talk more about it later. My grandmother was told that the children would be restored to her, but she was requested to act as if they were really to be sent away. Accordingly, she made up a bundle of clothes and went to the jail. These kids were in jail. I know I keep saying that, but these children are in jail. When she arrived, she found William handcuffed among the gang and the children in the trader's cart. Now, the trader, they're calling it a chart here. I'm going to show you a picture of how enslavers moved Black people from place to place in a minute. The scene seemed too much like reality. She was afraid there might have been some deception or mistake. She fainted and was carried home. When the wagon stopped at the hotel, several gentlemen came out and proposed to purchase William. But the trader refused their offers without stating that he was already sold. And now came the trying hour for that drove of human beings, driven away like cattle, to be sold they knew not where. Husbands were torn from wives, parents from children, never to look upon each other again. This side of the grave, there was wringing of hands and cries of despair. Dr. Flint had the supreme satisfaction, that's her enslaver, her pedophile enslaver, of seeing the wagon leave town. And Mrs. Flint, this was a crazy white woman married to Dr. Flint. She knew what her husband was like, but she would blame the women. She would blame Linda for her husband's licentious behavior. And Mrs. Flint had the gratification of supposing that my children were going, quote, as far as wind and water would carry them, end of quote. According to agreement, my uncle followed the wagon some miles until they came to an old farmhouse. There, the trader took the irons from William, and as he did so, he said, quote, you are a damn clever fellow. I should like to own you myself. Them gentlemen that wanted to buy you said that you were bright honest, and I must give you a good home. I guess your old master will swear tomorrow and call himself an old fool for selling the children. I reckon he'll never get their mammy back again. I expect she's made tracks for the North. Goodbye, old boy. Remember, I have done you a good turn. You must thank me by coaxing all the pretty gals to go with me next fall. That's going to be my last trip. The trading in niggers, the trading in niggers is a bad business for a fellow that's got a heart like mine. Move on, you fellows. And the gang went on. God alone knows where. Let me show you all very quickly. Is this the coffle? Yeah. Now that's the normal coffle. And if you see, they got a violinist playing music, you know, making the people walk. And if you see in the front here, it's men. These are black men. And you see they're chained. You dig? They're chained. And the women are normally in the back. And you see the white men are on horseback. Okay. That's the form of a coffle. Now, I shouldn't say Linda's coffle, but where her uncle William was, or the children's uncle was, it was some kind of a cart, okay? And then they were taken out of town, all right, to be sold. But there was a trick going on here because the children's father had purchased them and not told anybody. Okay, where am I? This is Linda talking now. Much as I despise and detest the class of slave traders, a lot of people did, but they bought they bought slaves from them. But what the heck? Whom I regard as the vilest wretches on earth, I must do this man the justice to say what he seemed to have some feeling. He took a fancy to William in the jail and wanted to buy him. People, do you hear this? When he heard the story of my children, he was willing to aid them in getting out of Dr. Flint's power, even without charging the customary fee. My uncle procured a wagon and carried William and the children back to town. Great was the joy in my grandmother's house. The curtains were closed and the candles lighted. The happy grandmother cuddled the little ones to her bosom. They hugged her and kissed her and clapped their hands and shouted. She knelt down and poured forth one of her heartfelt prayers of thanksgiving to God. The father was present for a while. That's the children's father, the white guy that actually purchased them, made a deal with the slave trader. And though such a parental relation as existed between him and my children take slight hold of the hearts or consciences of slaveholders, it must be that he experienced some moments of pure joy in witnessing the happiness he imparted. See, for my new people, Mr. Sands did try to buy his children. All right. But Dr. Flint was like, nah, nah, nah. I'm holding on to them children because I want Linda. I'm going to have Linda. And as I've told many of you before, this man, Dr. Flint, was old enough to be Linda's grandfather. All right, so you want to talk about pedophilia today? You need to go back to our enslavement period. All right, pedophilia was fine with white enslavers. Absolutely. Okay, let me not preach because I want to get to these books. All right, my next book is Ida B. Wells. Okay, now Ida, she's in New York. She was run out of Memphis. Why? Because she wrote a true story about lynching. Okay, as I mentioned before, but I got to mention this again to you. Ida B. Wells. Now, Ida B. Wells was born right after slavery. She was born in 1862. So she was not an enslaved person, but her parents were. Now, how her parents taught her to read and write, I'll never know. But this girl was able to get a teaching gig and she was in her teens. Very smart woman. Anyway, she had a newspaper, the Free Speech. She wrote about the true reasons that these men were being lynched. Okay, because in the mainstream, the white media said that lynchings took place because black men raped white women. Well, Ida used to believe that. Many people did. Many black people did until Ida's friends, they were Thomas Moss, Calvin McDowell, and Henry Stewart. They were lynched and they were businessmen, black businessmen, opened up a grocery store. And white folks lynched them because they were jealous of their success. Hello. So when Ida B. Wells wrote about that, well, white people went crazy and they wanted to kill her. They burnt down a newspaper a building. She was out of town at the time. Okay. And when she came back to Memphis, the black people gathered around and said, look, you're going to have to get out of town because they want to kill you. What I love about Ida, she said, look, I carry a gun too. They come after me, I'm going to take one or two of them with me. Oh, anyway, but the black people told her, look, stay away. Because see, if she came back, it would be a race riot and more black people will be killed. So she's in New York now. She's in New York. She's all by herself. You know, she got a gig, another gig with a black newspaper. All right. But she's lonesome. But these black women got together and they wanted to honor her for telling the truth about lynchings. Wait, I got a couple comments. Let me bring them up. Where are we? Let me show this. Where we at? Where we at? Okay, I don't know how to pronounce this name. You go tripping. Okay, what up? Okay. Oh, we're against slavery, but we don't look at the enslaved. Dig. That's I. Let me tell you something. What am I gonna call you? You go trip. I'm gonna call you. You go trip. Check this out. The contradictions during that period, and even today, which I'm going to point out when I get to Assata. Boom. The contradictions are there, and I want you to see them, and I want you to share them with your children and grandchildren. And if you don't have any children, find some black children that you could help. Find a black family that you could assist. Boom. This is how we win. All right. I'm going to Ida now. The arrangements for that meeting were perfect. This is the meeting where she's going to be honored. An electric light spelled Iola, that was her pen name, at the back of the platform. The programs were miniature copies of the Free Speech, that was her original paper. Mrs. Victoria E. Matthews presided, and after a beautiful program of speeches, resolutions, and music, I was introduced to tell my story. When the committee told me I had to speak, I was frightened. I want you all to listen to this very carefully. I had been a writer, both as correspondent and editor for several years. I had some little reputation as an essayist from schoolgirl days and had recited many times in public recitations, which I had committed to memory. In canvassing for my paper, I had made talks asking for subscriptions. But this was the first time I had ever been called on to deliver an honest to goodness address. Although every detail of the horrible lynching affair was imprinted on my memory, I had to commit it all to paper, and so got up to read my story on that memorable occasion. As I described the cause of the trouble at home, and my mind went back to the scenes of the struggle, to the thought of the friends who were scattered throughout the country, a feeling of loneliness and homesickness for the days and the friends that were gone came over me, and I felt the tears coming. A panic seized me. I was afraid that I was going to make a scene and spoil all those dear good women what they had done for me. I kept saying to myself that whatever happened, I must not break down. And so I kept on reading. I had left my handkerchief on the seat behind me and therefore could not wipe away the tears which were coursing down my cheeks. The women were all back of me on the platform and could not see my plight. Noting nothing in my voice, it seemed, gave them an inkling of the true state of affairs. Only those in the audience could see the tears dropping At last, I put my hand behind me and beckoned even as I kept reading. Mrs. Matthews, the chairman, came forward and asked her for my handkerchief. She brought it and I wiped my nose and streaming face, but I kept on reading the story which they had come to hear. I was mortified that I had not been able to prevent such an exhibition of weakness. Now she calls this weakness. I thought that was really interesting. It came on me unawares. It was only the only time in all those trying months that I had so yielded to personal feelings. See, this girl's a warrior. She's a soldier warrior. She's a sister soldier in the 19th century. That it should come at a time when I wanted to be at my best in order to show my appreciation of the splendid things these women had done. They were giving me tangible evidence that although my environment had changed, I was still surrounded by kind hearts. After all these years, I still have a feeling of chagrin over the exhibition of weakness. She calls her tears weakness. Whatever my feelings, I am not given to public demonstrations. And once before in all my life had I given way to woman's weakness in public. Now, what she's calling weakness, I'm calling letting her feelings show. But this is what the lesson I want you all to get from this, especially young people listening to me. Even though she had never spoken public before an audience like this, she was frightened. But did her fear stop her? No. Her fear did not stop her. She went on and did her very best. And what she calls tears is only because she didn't want to cry in front of those people. Boom. She called that a weakness. That's a warrior woman. All right, here we go with Assata. 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 And like I told you on Tuesday, I said I was going to read the poem that she wrote about her dear friend Eva, who was taken to a psychiatric ward. They're in prison together. And this is what Assata wrote about her friend Eva right after the riot. It is a poem, and here it is. Assata. Rhinoceros woman who nobody wants and everybody used. They say you're crazy because you're not crazy enough to kneel when told to kneel. Hey, big woman, with scars on the head and scars on the heart that never seem to heal. I saw your light and it was shining. You gave them love, they gave you shit. You gave them you, they gave you Hollywood. I want you to think about that one. They purr at you because you know how to roar and back it up with realness. Rhinoceros woman, big mama in a little world. You closed your eyes and neon spun inside your head because it was dark outside. You read your Bible, but God never came. Your daddy would have loved you, but what would the neighbors say? They hate you, mama, because you expose their madness and their cruelty. They can see in your eyes 1,000 nightmares that they have made come true. Black woman, bad woman, wear your bigness on your chest like a badge, because you done earned it. Strong woman, Amazon, wear your scars like jewelry, because they were bought with blood. They call you mad and almost had you believe in that. They called you ugly and you hid yourself behind yourself and wallowed in their shame. Rhinoceros woman, the world is blind, the sleight of mind, and cannot see how beautiful you are. I saw your light. I saw your light, and it was shining. Ella, isn't that a beautiful poem? Here's a line I want to leave you with. You gave them love, they gave you SHIT. You gave them you, and they gave you Hollywood. I'm going to stop right there. How many of you are relying on movies to tell you how to live? How many of you are looking at movies and pulling out what you think is the philosophy of life? They gave you Hollywood. Yes. What movies are out on Black people that make sense to you? Okay. What TV shows are out there that make sense to you and your children and your grandchildren? I am saying this because it is very easy to get caught up in Hollywood movies. I did as a child. I believed them. They were my philosophy. They were my direction for life. Me and all my friends. Don't get caught up in white America's Hollywood. Every time you look at a film, break that sucker down. Understand that every scene that you see, there's about 10 to 15 other people that you don't see because those scenes are manufactured. They are not real. Movies are not real. This is why I encourage people to look at as little bit of television as possible. Now, I know some of you have your favorite shows and all. I'm not saying, just give up everything in life. I'm not saying that, but I am saying this, that this country wants you stupid. Yes. And the media is a platform for capitalism with all those dumbass commercials, excuse me. Boom. And TV shows that are put together to put forth a kind of ideology that you really don't need. Understand that. Black people, you have been hated in this country. Once slavery was over, they did not want you here. So understand that. So it is imperative that we create, and we already really have, but we consciously create ourselves as a nation within a nation. Hello. The slave ship, let me put this back up before I go. The slave ship is the birth of American culture. Yes. Spirituals, where do you think they came from? Africa. The singing, the dancing, the preaching, the being. Africa. The birth of American culture, the prison system, and Black solidarity. You heard me read that poem that Assata wrote about Eva, that they put in a psychiatric ward. And what do you think they do with prisoners when they put them in a psychiatric ward? Understand, even when you in a regular prison, they're in charge of your food, they're in charge of your water. But in a psychiatric ward, God only knows what they did to Eva. I know this. Notice people, if you notice people in your family, when they come out of prison, God only knows what has been put inside of them, literally, and inside of them, figuratively. All right. So we got to care for each other as a race of people. We must care about our own Black humanity. Don't just try to be. I'm going to bring up this comment and I swear I'm going to sign off. Very good. I'm going to even leave that up. Right on. Look, we must look out for ourselves and we must not imitate this culture that not only hates us, but hates everybody else in the world. How many wars are we in right now as a country? And never forget what I told you in the beginning of this episode about what's going on in Africa. All right. Brothers and sisters, I love you all so very, very much. And I can't wait to be with you again next Tuesday at 2:00, same time, same place. Readings with Regina. And listen, check out the books on your own. If you're broke, libraries are still here. You ain't got to buy the book, but do read. All right. Because if you don't use your brain will just leave you. Okay. Love you dearly. I pray for you every night and every day. And I will see you next Tuesday. Bye now.